I teach this, and this is all the path of enlightenment, becoming aware that we all are on the path of enlightenment, and as a result of being on that path of enlightenment, that is our evolution through the various stages, various ages of consciousness. And enlightenment obviously relies upon light, and light is nothing more than information. And light informs energy how to be, and we're all energy. And so the more that we pursue the enlightenment path, it's revelatory to more and more of who we are. And in the course of that, we are healing our erroneous perceptions of self. And as we do that, we surrender the authenticity of this false perception of self that we've created. More of our authentic self emerges. And we experience less stress. And what replaces that stress experience is happiness. Ultimately, we're tasked with becoming bliss, which is described as perfect happiness, but that's nothing more than the absence of stress, and it is a condition of being. It is not an emotion.
Hello, my dear friends. I'm Donald Lee, and this is Expressing and Revealing Your Truth with Donald Lee. It's a podcast in which I help you understand the truth about who you really are and how you can express and reveal that truth in the world. To do that, I interview people who have had transformational spiritual experiences, the type of experiences that many of us wish we had, but never do. Yet by learning from my guests' experiences and the wisdom they have gained from those experiences, all of us can glimpse a bigger vision of who we really are and how we can live our lives more fully, more peacefully, more lovingly. Be sure to download my free mini ebook containing 5 of the 50 parables from my popular book, The Band Director's Lessons About Life. These little parables are short, easy to read, inspiring, and also help you to understand more about who you really are. There's a link in the show notes to get your free ebook. In this episode, I interview Dean Graves. Dean is a renowned meditation teacher, mental health counselor, and spiritual guide with over 20 years of experience in the field. Through his expertise in mental health and deep spiritual understanding, he provides a holistic approach to healing and growth. Dean is not only an expert in the Law of One, but he regularly speaks with the Raw Collective, which dictated the Law of One books through the channel Carla Rueckert in the early 1980s. Dean has brilliant insights into the nature of life, consciousness, and humanity. He is also the author of 5 books based on his knowledge and experience. I found this interview so valuable that I downloaded and saved the whole transcript, so I'm sure you will find it fascinating as well. Hello again, my dear friends. We're here today with Dean Graves, and Dean has a very interesting story. So I'm going to let him jump in and tell his story of spiritual awakening and unfoldment. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you, Donald. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Go ahead, Dean. We were just talking about the weather in Alberta versus the weather in Tennessee a little bit, but
yeah,
it's
stark
springtime
contrast,
everywhere
I'm sure.
finally now. So that's good. So how and where did you start out, Dean?
I've learned a lot since my spiritual awakening. And one of the most strategic things that I've learned is that my life plan has been pretty much textbook of what our design is. And we are designed to experience a lot of what we don't like. And we do that because if all we experienced what we liked, we wouldn't know what we liked, because we learn by comparison and contrast. We learn by analogy. And so the design for all of us is according to an archetypical mind, which is a blueprint for how we process thought that guides us to create an erroneous perception of self that we call a hierophant or an identity or an ego. It's all the same thing. And we pursue life according to that identity until we reach a point of awakening, which is a most often misunderstood concept. We are tasked with learning about ourselves through the tool of awareness. And awareness is the inherent characteristic of the Creator that we are tasked with becoming at this range of consciousness that we all share. And while we are creating this hierophant and learning to modify this hierophant to try to actually trick the world to give us more of what we like, all consciousness is motivated to get more of what we like. And so we create this hierophant and we try to trick the world to giving us more of what we like until we have an awakening, which is nothing more than that point in our life where that same awareness that heretofore has been pointed outside of us in order to observe the world around us, to modify our identity to make it more effective in trying to get us what we like. The awakening is when we, for the first time, significantly invert that same awareness. And we become aware that regardless of the perceived conventional success that we may be having financially or whatever, we're not happy. And in order to have that awareness and become aware that we're not happy, you have to invert that awareness. And once we have that awareness, it is incumbent upon us to undertake the task of exploring ourselves, which is our common purpose. There's no one that has a different purpose. We all have a separate mission, but no one has a different purpose. And learning to use that tool of awareness to heal the erroneous perceptions of self that we have created by virtue of our experiences. Surrender those erroneous perceptions of self, which is actually nothing more than a bundle of beliefs that we call a mind. And as we do that, we reduce the authenticity of this identity that we've created. And as we do that, then our authentic self, psychology likes to call it a true self, it's all the same thing, it's who we really are, begins to emerge. And as we do that, we experience a decreasing amount of stress, which is anything that we don't like. Stress is actually our teacher. And it's a spectrum. It ranges from the very minor to the most extreme on an individual basis trauma. And so this awareness that we're tasked with exploring is the tool that we have to discover what needs to be healed. And by virtue of discovery, we heal it. If you discover that hitting yourself in the head with a 2x4 hurts and you discover that's painful, then you have to let that behavior go, the belief that you're supposed to continue to pound yourself in the head with a 2x4. So my awakening was, ideally I'd say it was one event that I just had this tremendous awakening and became aware that I was not happy. But like most folks, we have to get multiple messages in order to realize what it is that we've discovered. And so I had incrementally just multiple awarenesses, and I had actually a dream. And a dream that it woke me up. It woke me up in the middle of the night. I got up and actually went and typed it out on the computer. And I recall it distinctly. It was so extremely real that I was there. I was participating in that. And it was essentially instructions on how to surrender my attachment to the authenticity of the physical. And it was by virtue, it was in a story. It was as a game that we were playing, but it was a very serious game and it was very physical. And that led me on that path to seriously begin to meditate. And it is through that practice of developing a meditation rigor that the spiritual stories that I think that you are seeking in your podcast began to happen.
By the way, Dean, that is a beautiful expression. I've never heard it stated so clearly and so succinctly. So thank you for that introduction. I'm going to record that. I'm going to copy that down from the transcript.
Okay.
So I have that.
Okay. Well, thank you. I teach this, and this is all the path of enlightenment. Becoming aware that we all are on the path of enlightenment, and as a result of being on that path, of enlightenment. That is our evolution through the various stages, various ages of consciousness. And enlightenment obviously relies upon light, and light is nothing more than information. And light informs energy how to be, and we're all energy. And so the more that we pursue the path along the enlightenment path, the more succinct, more deeper is such a overused phrase. It really doesn't have any meaning, but it's revelatory to more and more of who we are. And in the course of that, we are healing our erroneous perceptions of self. And as we do that, as I had mentioned before, we surrender the authenticity of this false perception of self that we've created. More of our authentic self emerges. And we experience less stress. And what replaces that stress experience is happiness. Ultimately, we're tasked with becoming bliss, which is described as perfect happiness, but that's nothing more than the absence of stress, and it is a condition of being. It is not an emotion.
Just a little break from the program to mention a couple of things. Firstly, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave a short comment. It really helps with the algorithm to find more people who would enjoy these interviews. Also, if you're interested in spiritual growth, you might be interested in my series of spiritual books. As a spiritual author and a former band director, I use my little "the band director" trademark in these books because I use music as a metaphor for life and the journey of becoming a musician as a metaphor for our spiritual journey. There are 3 books in this series. The Band Director's Lessons About Life is a book of modern-day parables inspired by events from my teaching career. When you're working with kids, things naturally come up that we sometimes call teachable moments. Little events where you realize there's a bigger lesson happening right now than the alternate F-sharp fingering on the clarinet that I was trying to teach. I started writing some of these little stories down and turning them into modern-day parables. So the Band Director's Lessons About Life has 50 little parables. It's a bit like a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. Each parable is about 3 pages long. Each begins with a story that happened at school, and then there's a reflection section that draws a spiritual lesson out of the events of the story. That is, it explains what the spiritual metaphor means. The Band Director's Lessons About Life is easy to read, makes a great gift, and expresses many universal spiritual principles in an easy-to-understand way. If you want to go deeper in your spiritual growth, I've also published a study guide to accompany the Book of Parables. It turns the Band Director's Lessons About Life into a year-long course in spiritual development. You will spend a week on each of the 50 parables. There is a deeper teaching about the meaning of each parable, reflection and discussion questions, especially helpful if you would like to use the study guide in a group setting, and a different meditation for each lesson. The 3rd book in this series is a little book titled The Band Director's Pocket Guide to Spiritual Growth. This little book explains a simple 3-step process for putting your spiritual growth into high gear. You might also be interested in my 2-book series about the craziness in our world today. The first book, What the Hell is Going On? The Web of Fraud That is Enslaving Everyone and How We Can Escape to Freedom, is still the best big picture expose of what's really going on behind all this craziness. It includes a spiritual perspective of what's happening, which most books leave out. But it also looks at the economics, the philosophy, the psychology, the history, etc., of the many trends that just don't make sense and are, in fact, elaborate frauds. The second book in this series focuses more on solutions to the mess we're in. It's The Way Forward, how to escape the totalitarian control of the New World Order and heal from its trauma. This book explains the 3 types of warfare we're being subjected to: spiritual warfare, psychological warfare, and 5th-generation warfare, and how we can sensibly respond on these 3 levels of body, mind, and spirit. You can learn more about all of my books at my website, www.cominghomespirit.com, because after all of us are on a spiritual journey back home to God. So that's cominghomespirit.com. You can also go directly to my Shopify page at cominghomespirit.myshopify.com, where you can purchase my books directly from me in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. I can now ship paperback books to the United States and Canada. If you're enjoying this podcast, I really think you'll enjoy my many books as well. Now, back to the program.
Right. And so consequently, we're healing ourself. The whole process of evolution is the process of surrendering our perception of separation. And as we do that, we integrate more completely with the source, with one infinite creator. And that is the conclusion of our evolutionary process. And then we'll do it again because we are all volunteers and we perceive ourselves as independent, autonomous beings that have, at this range of consciousness, we don't realize that we're volunteers yet. We perceive ourselves mostly as victims that need salvation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But
they both start with the letter V, but they're very different.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, the nature of your experience transforms when you you recontextualize those perceptions of self and what you're doing there and what our purpose is. But after this dream that propelled me to intensify my meditation practice, and I had a visitation from in meditation, I had a visitation from my higher self and also my spouse's higher self, which were presented to me as separate entities, and they're much higher consciousness than we are. We're in 3rd density, they're in 6th density. 6th density is the plateau of the range of consciousness of everyone's higher self. And they actually visited me I couldn't tell you whether it lasted 3 minutes or 3 hours because the time was irrelevant. And the feeling was so overwhelming that the feeling of love and just higher vibrational consciousness was so intense that it took me actually a couple hours to get over it after they departed. And so I suspect that the visitation was actually, from our perspective, very short, but it was very intense. And that was a preparation for me that my spouse was going to die. And so that was kind of a preparation for me for what my reason for being here was. After that, I had another visitation, and meditation is actually presented as a parade of what we perceive to be extraterrestrial beings, but it included several social memory complexes of a 5th density level that I was familiar with. It included the Arcturians and the Pleadians that were just one after another coming and visiting, and they didn't stay for any length of time. But that whole stream of things was concluded with the metaphysical spirit of what we perceive to be the incarnation of Mahatma Gandhi. It was an analog project. Mahatma Gandhi was their analog projection. And they stayed and talked for a while. And the feeling, the information that they gave in and of itself was not that significant, but the feeling of that was very much like a very grandfatherly figure. Is just very supportive, very comforting, and matter of fact, they said, when you need help, when you feel overwhelmed, contact me. And I've not had to call upon that again because I have developed a very close relationship with my higher self, and we talk daily. And I was afforded an opportunity after my then spouse died to have about a 10 or 11-year period of very intense learning. And it wasn't in total isolation, but I had no demands on me to do other things. And so consequently,
Right.
it was relative isolation. And it was training, preparing me for being a messenger, which is primarily what I do now, to share what I have learned and to guide people in their processes along their enlightenment path.
Great. So, how long have you been doing this? When did this last experience happen, roughly?
Well, my spouse died in 2011, and the intense training period began. The two experiences prior to her departure were the visitation of the higher selves and the parade of visitations, from the various entities. And the intense
Right.
training began really when she died in 2011, and it goes on today. But the intensity of it was about a 10-year period, so about 2021 was obviously not the end of it, because I don't know everything. I'm still learning as we go.
I know.
Yeah,
Our journey continues. That's right. It's an
right.
eternal journey.
Yeah, exactly. So today I teach groups. I have written 4 books. I maintain 2 podcasts, and starting another one, June 1, we'll launch another podcast. The one other active podcast that I do is called Chatting with the Arcturians, and my domestic partner, my significant other, is a vocal channel for the Arcturians. And so we have regular conversations with the Arcturians, and they provide us with information, different perspectives on the law of one. All that we do is, I don't want to say preach, but we teach the law of one and try to make it applicable to people in their daily lives and how it can aid in their healing. The law of
Right.
one was a series of channelings that some folks in Louisville, Kentucky did back in the early 90s. And the entity that was the channel, the source, was a very high consciousness. It was a 6th density consciousness. And that is who my higher self is too. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it's a continuation of that information.
Right. And this entity called itself Ra,
Well,
right?
yes, actually, the entity is part of Ra. There is an aspect of it that is the primary channel, which we historically identified as Osiris, that visited the Egyptians, and the Egyptians distorted the message that was brought at the time. But Ra
Right.
actually is, in the course of developing creation at a much higher level than we are, inherent characteristics of the creator became delineated. And 5 inherent characteristics were delineated, one of which was Ra, which is love. And we are tasked with becoming awareness in our return journey. After we become awareness, we will enter the 4th density, which is tasked with doing the same thing with love. And then we will advance to the 5th density, we will do the same thing with wisdom. The 6th density does the same thing with unity, and 7th density does the same thing with stillness. And so those are the 5 inherent characteristics, and they are hierarchical only from the standpoint that on the return journey, you have to build the floor before you build the walls before you build the ceiling, and so forth. So the foundational inherent characteristics we are tasked with becoming is awareness.
Okay. Now, you defined awareness a little early. Do you distinguish any difference between the words awareness and consciousness, or
Sure.
are they synonyms for you?
No, consciousness, we are all consciousness. Everything that we experience is consciousness. Consciousness is the one infinite creator with a founding distortion, and that distortion is the perception of separation. And so consequently, that allows us to have autonomous experiences and be unique in our exploration of our lives and in creation itself. And it's only because we perceive ourselves as separate that we have free will, and that's called the perception of separation actually is what free will is. We misperceive free will to be the choice to turn right or to turn left or whatever. But we only have that choice because we perceive ourselves as separate. If we did not perceive ourselves as separate, there would be no exploration by analogy or anything else.
Right. And essentially, we would have maintained our unity with the Creator, and we would not have an existence or a perception of an existence as a separate self. Is that right?
Yeah. And when we're saying we, I mean, we are the one infinite creator experiencing itself at this range of consciousness.
Right.
And so consequently, we are heavily in free will works like an intoxicant. When you drink too much whiskey, then you do stupid things that you wouldn't do. If you lose your awareness when you drink too much whiskey. And free will does the same thing, and the hierarchies of creation are made possible by increasing degrees of free will intoxication. So we are very intoxicated with free will at the range of consciousness that we experience. And so the whole process of returning to the Creator is sobering from that perception of separation.
That's a fascinating perspective. I had never thought of it that way, or read about it in that way. You've got all kinds of brilliant insights, Dean.
I've spent a lot of time studying this with a very good teacher. So
yeah, your higher self.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Now, for those of our listeners and viewers who may not know, it's my understanding that the law of one, as taught in these, and actually, I recently went through all of the books, the recordings. I listened to it on audiobook, but I went through all of the Law of One books. And this is the same, is it not, a law of one referred to repeatedly by Edgar Cayce as being in Atlantis, this teaching.
Well, the law of one is pervasive to creation. So it greatly transcends any perception of what we experience on Earth. We're a minor part of creation. What Edgar Cayce, people misperceive Edgar Cayce as being a channel, and Edgar Cayce never channeled, but he had the ability to foresee timelines. And so consequently, his predictions of the future were predicated upon probabilities of timelines as the trajectory was being followed at that time. Errors begin to materialize in any prophet's ability to see timelines because we have free will, because we choose, which timeline as a population we're going to follow. And so there is no inevitability other than that we will continue to follow timelines. It's just our choice as to which ones we will follow.
Yeah. And what we do matters, which is why all kinds of prophecies, especially ones in the distant future, it's like a weather forecast. The farther out you're trying to forecast, the sketchier it becomes, because things can change. And with human affairs, it can change because all of us make different decisions every day, every moment. And there's billions of us to make decisions, and it's impossible to predict.
Right, but
you can see trends developing.
Economists invented meteorologists to make themselves look good.
Well, to a certain extent, I'm an economist. I have a degree in economics.
Okay, well, I was going to use. You didn't know that of your profession.
I was going to use that as an analogy too, because economists have all of these various little economic models, right?
Yeah.
And what we call model, I don't like to use that word because it's very misleading. These aren't models; they're systems of equations.
Right.
Right. And so it's all numbers. It's all mathematics.
Predicting probability.
Yeah, well, the proper word is not even predicting, but projecting.
Projecting.
Right.
Okay.
So you're taking a historical set of data, whether it's on, say, gross domestic product or inflation rates or interest or whatever. You're taking a bunch of historical data, and you're projecting the trends in that out into the future. And so the near-term projections are reasonably accurate, but that accuracy diminishes exceedingly quickly. right? So by the time you're trying to project this is just a statistical property of all models. I mean, climate models are really the same.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking past data and projecting it into the future based on the trends that are in the data that you've inputted, right?
Right.
So they're only as good as the data you've put in.
Right. So if
And
there are fallacies in the data, then certainly.
yeah, then that makes it even worse. But the statistical properties of this mathematical technique are such that when you're projecting the next time period, your accuracy is reasonably good.
Mm-hmm.
In the second time period into the future, it falls to about 2/3 accurate. And by the time you're projecting 3 time periods into the future, you're no better than a coin toss, 50-50.
Yeah.
So, by trying to make projections, 50, 100 years into the future, it's really pointless, whether you're doing it with economics or whether you're doing it with a climate or any model that's a time series model. Your projections into the future are meaningless after about 2 time periods. And that's just dealing with, as I wrote in one of my books, in economics, we can at least understand the processes at work somewhat because you're dealing with human action, and all of us are human.
Mm-hmm.
So we can, we have some understanding of human motivations. But with a system like the climate that's so complex and we don't understand it, then we don't really know exactly what we're projecting. And and similarly, I think which kind of brings me around a lot of talking here on my part, but brings me around to, because I was recently hearing something about kind of political analysis of how, so many people now think, oh, we're in the end times, predicted, foretold in the Revelation of St. John. That was 2,000 years ago. And
it was
like,
negatively
there's no
oriented
way,
anyway. Yeah.
there's no way that a prophecy or whatever made 2,000 years ago is going to have any relevance for today. It's just so many things have changed. And throughout the course of my life, I've read so many different interpretations of the book of Revelation in terms of this current time. And in fact, you can go through every century since the time of St. John, and people in every century have believed that they were living through the end times predicted by the book of Revelation. And
that's wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's just like that. That's not the message. That's not the message. But whatever.
Yeah. Well, we are in a significant period of transition.
Yes.
And
yes.
We are in stages of experience that have never experienced by our population before. Yeah. But it's not unique, and it's not apocalyptic by any means. It's just transformative.
Yes, and like most transformative experiences in our lives, as you were saying, we come upon them when things get worse and worse in our life, to the point that we finally wake up to the fact that, hold it, I can't keep doing this anymore. Right?
Yeah. And that, we stay the same until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And then we change. And so we're going to experience a lot of what most people are going to perceive to be painful, because it's going to require them to change. Yeah. And so consequently, they're probably going to have a negative perspective of it. But you have to dispose of the old in order to make way for the new. Wow. And we're just in a stage of transformation. And what makes it more difficult than it needs to be is we have a significant number of prevailing hegemonies that restrict our capacity to see things as they actually are, and that's part of the healing.
Would you like to elaborate on that a bit more, Dean?
Well, one of the strategic things that we have to achieve at this range of consciousness is we have to awaken enough to make a strategic decision. We've already talked about we are designed to create this hierophant, this identity, this false perception of self. And the choice that we are required to make, and it is called just the choice, is to continue along that path to enhance that identity, ultimately to the nth degree, which is the path of separation from the Creator. that is a path of service to self, or to surrender that identity and choose a path of service to others. That is the path, the direct path to the Creator, because we're surrendering our perception of separation and pursuing greater unity. But that choosing the service to self path can go on for billions of years and achieve significant evolutionary consciousness power. And those folks, by choosing that path, have chosen to separate themselves from the higher self as well. In order for us to continue to participate in creation as consciousness, and we are all conceptual, that's all we are, as we are fed what is identified as intelligent infinity, and that, or intelligent energy, rather. Intelligent energy is the energy that flows through us constantly that allows us to continue to participate in creation. If we're choosing the service to others' path, then we're choosing to maintain that and enhance that source of energy. If we're choosing the path of service to self, we're choosing to alienate ourselves from the higher self. And so consequently, we're also alienating ourselves from that source of energy, but we still need it. We can't continue to participate in creation without that source of energy. So you have to find alternative sources for that. The range of consciousness that we currently occupy is Goldilocks' porridge. We have enough energy to make it worth their while to steal that energy, but we're not smart enough to know that we're not supposed to give it away.
That's cute. I like that. I love that, Dean. You are full of brilliant insights.
Well, thank you. And so we are and have been a significant target for higher consciousness service to self that need that energy. And if you understand that the service to self hierarchy works very much like Tupperware, or you've got a lot of minions running around down there trying to collect, sell Tupperware and try to collect this energy, but it funnels up to the top of a pyramidal leadership. And so there are lots of folks. Our particular experience is a bifurcated experience. We have folks choosing in great numbers to polarize service to others, but we also have a significant number choosing to polarize service to self. And that's not true of other third density experiences. You can go service to self entirely as a population, or service to others, which is 90% of the creationary experiences are polarizing service to others. But that 10% is a real PIA to we who are in third density, because they greatly interfere by seeding falsehoods and creating, through those falsehoods, creating what we perceive to be authenticity or truth or whatever. And the more fear that they can instill, the more successful they are in extracting this energy. So every time that we have a bellicose conflict, they're reaping the rewards of that. Anytime that we promote that we should fear God, that's promoting fear. That's exacting that energy. And we have lots of hegemonies that are foundational to large portions of the population that perpetuate our existence within the lower ranges of the consciousness.
Yeah. So when you're in fear, now they can suck our energy when we're in those lower states of consciousness, like fear, which is part of why they want to keep us in fear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they feed off of that, and what we perceive is interesting anomalies. For example, we have been quarantined for a long time, and that quarantine is now off, but we were quarantined in order to restrict the amount of influence that a extra planetary service to self could have upon our beingness, because we were seriously floundering. And so they isolated us from that influence. But that notwithstanding, before that isolation went into place, they were much more interactive on a daily basis with us. And the Easter Island statues, for example, the lines of Nazca, Stonehenge, are good examples of features that they left behind in order to intimidate us. That those people at that time were very fearful of those things just appearing. And so the statues, the lines of Nazca, which were much more visible to the population because of different mountain heights around it and so forth. But Stonehenge was nothing more than an anomaly that the service to self left in order to be a constant source of reminder of their presence in the populations that dwelt at the time.
Fascinating.
And there
And
were lots of
this,
others too, but
would that go for like all the stuff that's coming out of Turkey in the last decade or more with Göbekli Tepe?
tongue twister.
Yeah, a little bit for us in our
Yeah,
language.
that it does.
Tepe is simply the Turkish word for hill, right? So that's
Yeah, the
the
gates
name
of
of
hell. Yeah.
that hill. But those structures there are in some ways similar to Stonehenge, right? They're these monolithic stone structures. They have carvings, and they go back to, it's hard to tell, but probably about the same time as Stonehenge.
Mhm.
Is that,
Yeah,
do you apply the
there's
same?
stuff all over the planet that's like that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And just lots of stuff that they talk about on ancient aliens that are so precisely manufactured. For the most
Yeah.
part, are stuff that the service to self left. But a lot of the planet was occupied for a long time before our third density experience has a very distinct beginning and an ending. It's roughly 76,000 years, and Raw describes it as regular as a clock. And the first third density experience that Earth enjoyed ended in February of 2016, and we began a new one. We didn't notice any end of it, but we are also experiencing a new third density experience, but we're also experiencing a new fourth density experience. And roughly 47%, I think, is the percentage that they had given me of the children being born since the mid 2000s are actually fourth density graduates. And they will be, they're in transitional bodies as they grow up and have children and assume responsibility, which they're just now getting to that age of responsibility that we normally consider, them to be reaching, will, because of their higher consciousness, will greatly influence the doings of the planetary population. And
Oh,
they'll be
that's
with us, and they'll be interacting with us for probably 2 or 3 generations, but each generation they will be transitioning more and more towards their fourth density body, which is much more electric than what we are. So the population as a whole will experience significantly less bellicosity, but also significantly less sickness, illness, physical difficulties, things of that nature.
that's great. I think the world is ready for that to start just about any time. As far as I can see, our populations are getting sicker and sicker all the time.
I think we'll get a lot of cheers for that transition.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned this quarantine. Now, it seems to me, correctly if I'm wrong, that the quarantine was put in place after the Lucifer rebellion, as the Law of One describes it. Am I right about that?
I don't know. Lucifer is actually an archetype of the creator, and that's a religious concept, a misinterpretation of Lucifer. It's part of the archetypical mind. Lucifer is actually the potentiator of the mind, which provides the service to us of being unconscious. We have that awakening, and overcoming that is the first step of awakening. And unconsciousness is actually the potentiator of the mind. It is because we experience that negative effect of being in chaos and in being unconscious that once we overcome that, then it propels us forward even more dramatically than it would without Lucifer's participation. Lucifer is an archetype of the creator that is a distortion of a distortion. There are 32 archetypes that our portion of creation are made from: 5 inherent characteristics, free will, which is an archetype of the creator, and 26 other distortions that are distortions of the 5 inherent characteristics. And so, let me explain a little further. What we perceive to be a galaxy is actually a universe in higher consciousness phraseology. Each star is occupied by an archetype of the creator. Our universe is considered to be a 9-star universe, which means that it is expanded in groups of 9 stars, all with these same archetypes. And other universes have different configurations of the archetypes, mixing and matching and so forth. And so we are a 9-star system. The Arcturians are a sister 9-star system. The Pleadians are another sister 9-star system. The Lyrians, and all the folks that deal with us as their cumulative 9-star system. And we do have a consciousness for our portion of the 9-star system as well. In other words, our 9-star system speaks as one voice, not to us, because we are within the system. So Ra is pervasive to creation, but there are aspects of Ra that are part of our 9-star system, and not competing, but separate 9 Ra's participate in the Arcturian 9-star system and the Pleiadian 9-star system, eventually working towards 7th density, where all of that is dissipated and preparing to reunite with the Creator.
Fascinating. So is any of this, is some of this, all of it that we've talked about, is included in any of your books? Would you like to just touch on that for a few minutes?
Yeah, I go into pretty significant detail of the archetypical mind and the structure of creation, the archetypes that, comprise our universe, how it affects us, and how it guides our experiences and so forth. The enigma of consciousness, the spiritual exploration of humanity's relationship to creation has all of that in it.
Which book, or do we need to read all of them?
No, the one I was just describing, The Enigma of Consciousness, is my compendium book so far. And it has all of that information in it.
Great. And there's links to that, I presume, at your website, plus your books are probably available on Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Amazon's cheaper, so you can get them at the bookstore, but they're $7-8 more expensive than they are at Amazon.
Well, the thing that as authors we can't compete with is Amazon's shipping rates, right?
Absolutely not. Yeah, and they offer significant discounts to the book buyers, regardless of whether it's self-published or commercially published. And that book is commercially published, so the publisher has to get their price setting chips in the pile.
Yeah. And tell us, what is your website, Dean?
The initial D, Dean, D-E-A-N, Graves, G-R-A-V as in Victor, E-S, no spaces or periods or anything, .org. And that has a link to the podcast, has a link to all the books, link to the other services. I still maintain somewhat of a practice of mental health, and I work with trauma primarily and alleviating people's traumas. And so all of that is available there, plus finding more about me. And I do public speaking. If somebody wants me to come and speak publicly, then always delighted to do that.
Oh, yeah, that's incredible. And I'll put naturally all of this information to contact you and your book link and stuff in the show notes. And personally, I'm going to get your book.
Okay.
and read it. I love this stuff. I'm fascinated. That's part of why I'm doing this podcast, to learn more. And I'm also fascinated by your podcast. Was it Speaking with the Arcturians or Talking with the Arcturians? What's the title of that one again?
Chatting with the Arcturians. And it's available, Apple and Spotify and everywhere.
Right. My podcast listening is normally when I'm driving, and I'm not doing that much driving at the moment, so I'm falling behind in all my regular podcasts. But I'm definitely going to include yours in my listening.
Oh, so, great. Okay.
Is there any more things you want to add, Dean, before we kind of wrap it up for today?
I can go on for days, Donald.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. As you investigate further, if you would like to talk further, I'd be delighted to come back and talk about any specifics that you might run across that would like elaboration on.
Yes, I just might do that after I've had a chance to read some of your book. I'm sure I'll have questions. And so as a teacher, I know that if one student in the class has a question, probably a third of the class at least has the same question. So probably the questions that I have and the answers you'll give are equally of interest to my little audience. So I'm sure
that would be
just
great.
might pursue that further.
I always try to make myself available. I mean, messaging is my mission at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
So
awesome. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Dean. It's been a joy to have you on, and certainly enlightening for me, and I'm sure it will be for our listeners and viewers as well. Thank you so much.
thank you, Donald. It's been a pleasure.